Hey friends, welcome to the Divorce Clarity Studio. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. On this podcast, I highlight experts who share their own divorce experiences, both professional and personal. Although each of our stories is unique, we share multiple things in common. And my goal is to raise up stories that let you feel seen, give you inspiration to move forward, and foster the courage to stand on your own 2 feet. Ultimately, the Divorce Clarity Studio is here to help you feel less alone, more informed, and more aligned with your values. Today's show is titled Divorce by Design, the Divorce Team Blueprint. I often discuss the power and necessity of building a divorce support team. There is no single expert who can walk you through the disruptive experience of divorce alone. Not the lawyer, they can't do it. Not the therapist, they can't do it. Not the financial professional or even the coach. You need all of these different professionals at different times and during different moments of divorce. Today's guest, Melissa Murphy Pavone, is a CFP, a certified financial planner, a CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and the founder of Mindful Divorce Partners. She is also the best-selling author of a recently launched book, Divorce by Design, how building a divorce team can help you get divorced efficiently without going broke in less than a year. Melissa specializes in helping individuals navigate the financial and emotional complexities of divorce with greater clarity, confidence, and strategy. Through her work, she advocates for more intentional, team-based divorce processes that help families stay informed, empowered, and focused on long-term stability. Drawing from both professional experience and personal experience as a child of divorce, Melissa is passionate about changing the conversation around divorce and helping people make educated financial decisions during one of life's most difficult transitions. Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks so much for having me, Lisa.
It's my pleasure. And this is a having you back situation.
I know, yes. I'm glad to be back here.
I'm so glad you're here. I mean, we met last year. We definitely connected. We are aligned in our vision of how the divorce process needs to work. But even though we know each other, I would love for you to share with my audience how you got started. What's your story? What brought you to this work?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was always in finance. I have been a CFP since 2012, so long time now. And through my financial planning work, realized early on, right, that people go through different transitions in their life, and financial planning for two people is very different than financial planning for one person. And whether it's, a death in the family or whether it's a divorce, that rebuild is really hard, right? And there's a whole set of complexities that comes with it that needs special attention. And so when I found out that there was an actual designation for the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, I jumped on it because I was a child of divorce. And my mom made a lot of decisions with her heart instead of her head. And she was a people pleaser, right? And still is a people pleaser. And I love her. But I wish, right? There's some divorce remorse there. And she didn't have the knowledge, the education. She didn't have the support, that you and I offer. She had one attorney that was, just an attorney, and really trying to do multiple jobs for her, right? And so I look at every client and see my mom, right? And see that there needs to be education and empowerment so that there's not divorce remorse later in life. And so it is my mission for everybody to really understand what their options are, what the pros, what the cons, what the tax consequences are, so that they fully understand it, right? And sometimes, often, when you're in the middle of it, when you're in the thick of it, you're in survival mode, right? You're trying to just get through the day. You are not thinking about the future. But I, as your financial, right, ally, have the ability to zoom out and look at future you and look at how these decisions today are going to impact your future. And that is my job and my mission.
I love that. I love that. Um, it's so hard to have clarity when you're in the midst of it. When you're at the beginning, when you're planning, like every stage has its own stressors, and sometimes they become enhanced, and sometimes they're a little quieter, but they're always still there in the background. And you're always thinking, could I have done this differently? Should I be doing this differently? And the idea of being able to release some divorce remorse is so
Yeah.
powerful. It's
Yeah.
so powerful. I love that phrase, divorce remorse, because it's really about like, oh, I didn't need to make that decision. I didn't have to give that away, or whatever it is.
Somebody told me, right, that that was
Yeah.
an option.
Right. That's the other thing. It's about creativity in divorce. I had a situation with a client recently where I shared a different way to think about spousal support and the timing and how to lump it. And she said to me, I didn't know I could even do that. I didn't even know I could ask for that. And that's what so many of us are faced with when we're going
Yeah.
through divorce.
Yeah. No two marriages, right? No two families look the same, and no two divorces should look the same. And I think that that's really where the expertise comes into play, and how you can create something that's unique for you and your family, so that both parties are happy and healthy after the fact.
Yeah. And that's key. Like, so both parties, this isn't about one party taking it all and crushing the other party. It's not a win-lose. Nobody wins in divorce.
No, nobody, right?
Nobody.
And financially, right, we're taking one, pool of income and now supporting two households, right? So that's not an easy feat to do, especially in, today's society where things are expensive, right? So it's not easy to do, but I think that's why and I love the word clarity. I use it often, financial clarity, but we need to replace that fear with facts and figures, right? And we
Mm,
need to, right, when we need to figure out what we're solving for. Um, and that's just not me, right? That's a team. And that's why I love like the work that you do and the coaching, and the whole premise behind the book is to have emotional support, financial organization, and legal strategy. And it starts with you and coaches. And I had a consult earlier this week, and I politely said, we're not ready to work on the numbers. We need to get you a coach, right? And here are the name of 3 coaches, and have
yeah.
consults with them. And I will turn people away because it is not, I have an ethical responsibility. If they are not ready, right? If they have not accepted the divorce, if they're not emotionally grounded enough to start having these conversations, then they're just paying me to repeat myself.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
can't do that. Other people might be able to do that, but morally I can't. So I oftentimes make sure that's one of the first questions I ask is, tell me who's on your emotional support team. And it's funny because people sort of sometimes, pause, but I'm like, who's your therapist? Who's your divorce coach? Right. And they're like, well, I only need one. Right. And I'm like, not necessarily. Right. You might need both. Right. One's sort of looking forward, one's sort of looking backwards. Right. We need a team of people so that you feel grounded, so that you and I can do the financial work together.
Yeah. Definitely. I love that premise. That's your starting premise. And your business is called Mindful Divorce Partners.
Yeah.
And so within your title, within the name of your entity is this idea of mindfulness and partnership, right? That these two things are so essential and so hard when you're going through divorce. It's so hard to be mindful because your head is spinning. You're in a hurricane or a cyclone, right? And you don't know which way to
Which way is
go.
up? Yeah.
Yeah.
Divorce brain is real, right? That like brain fog that you feel of like that inability to make decisions or think clearly, that's real. That's not just, like a saying. That's
Yeah.
real.
So speaking about what's real, um, you are an author and you wrote a book,
I
Divorce by
did.
Design. So I have two questions. I mean, I
Okay.
have lots of questions, but the first question is, so did you always think of yourself as a writer, or is that something new that came to you when you had this like inspiration for the book?
It's funny because I always had sort of on my vision board that I wanted to be an author. Never in a million years did I think it would be, based upon work or divorce, right? For that matter. I thought that I would write like a chick lit book, like something funny and comedy and light, because those are the books that I like to read. But,
Mhm.
as I had all of these consults time and time again, and I met people, and as I continue to meet people and speaking engagements and when I'm on stages, are like, I wish I would have knew this ahead of time. I didn't even know a CDFA existed. I didn't even know. And I just needed to, I realized that there was so much misinformation out there. And it was sort of like became a calling, I'm like, as people are booking consults with me, and you do consults all the time, right? But it's like one to one.
Mhm.
I'm like, how do I get out to the masses that the first call should not be an attorney? Right? Like we need to like stand together and say, like, you need a team of people. And I think when I say that, people automatically are like, oh no, like I can't afford a team, right? I'm just gonna get a lawyer and the lawyer will do it all. And the whole book, and it's an easy read. It's short and it's, I try to make it as light and, comical as divorce can be. But it's for the user, right? The end user of someone who's thinking about divorce and wants facts, right? And wants information and wants to know who the players are and wants to know what their options are instead of just booking a consult with the shark attorney and then being um using that attorney as their financial analyst and as their divorce coach, right? Or mental health professional. And so the premise of the book is if we start with emotional support, right? If we start with a coach like you, Lisa, that can get them grounded and, do some of that work and lay out those expectations and hold their hand through that, then they are ready to do some of the financial work with me or a CDFA. And if we can get, the marital balance sheet and the financial affidavit and sort of all of the facts and figures organized and the documents, where they need to be and figuring out where the titling of assets are, what's marital, what's separate. And then, right, and then only then do we then have the legal portion of that, right? And then whether that's a mediator or whether that's an attorney, right? Or whether that's the sole agree process, whatever that looks like, you then are coming to the table grounded and financially organized, right? So the time that you spend now with an attorney or a mediator is much less, right? Because you did the hard work and you did it at a much lower price point,
Yeah.
right? So it's more
Yeah.
efficient and it's time, it's more efficient cost wise and time wise to show up to the table so that your attorney is not your financial advisor and your financial analyst, right, is not your divorce coach, right? So you want everyone to stay in their zone of genius, and then you have people supporting you throughout the whole process, which is important because divorce is a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's a total roller coaster. And I love how you frame this all as um, different lids for different pots, right? That's essentially what we're saying because there are so many elements that make up our lives. There is a financial piece, there's an emotional piece, there is a social piece, there is a what do I do tomorrow piece. So all of these different elements don't have a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Like, unless you reach out to professionals who believe in the team building approach, right? I sometimes look at myself as the coach as like the hub of the wheel, like that center of the wheel. And then I send you to the financial person or the lawyer or the mediator or the real estate professional
Right.
or the lending professional.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know what you need
Yeah.
because you never did this before.
Yeah.
And all you know are the stories about how to get divorced, or the movies about how to get divorced.
Or the doom scrolling on Facebook at 2 a.m. of the horror stories, right?
Right. Right. I mean, and that is so much more prevalent these days. So I love how you craft it as one design plan. We're all about Marie Kondo, right?
Yeah.
Let's set up our feng shui in our space.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what we need to do with divorce to make it more comfortable.
And I think it's really important, right? The referrals that I send, and I'm sure you send, right, are thoughtful. It's not just like, hey, these are my 3 best friends, right? No, like
Right.
I want to get to know you and know what you need and know who's going to be the best fit for you. And I think that's important too, right? Especially as the divorce coach, you sort of usually, hopefully, are the first phone call and get them and can build out based upon your rapport with them who is going to be the best person. Do they need somebody who is young or old or male or female or Zoom or in person, right? Like, are they good with the computer? Or are they not good with the computer? Like, all of those things factor into who, right, the next professional is. And I take that into consideration always when I'm making recommendations. It's not just a location, right? But it's who is a good fit for this family dynamic.
Right. And one of the things that you need to do to get there, and something you are so expert at, is you have made yourself a huge network of professionals in different avenues. So whether it's like the New York Association of Divorce Mediators, or another professional group, or a local networking group, or so that, part of our role is to be in the community
Yeah.
to see this way we're meeting people, building relationships. And I think in divorce, people often feel like they have a relationship with nobody. Like everyone who was their friend, they're outside of this circle of a whirlwind. And when
Yeah.
they come in, they might even just make the whirlwind worse
Yeah.
because they have their own stake in the problem.
Yeah, and
So-
you understand that because like the person that you love and we're supposed to spend the rest of your life with, right? Like you no longer trust, so it's hard to bring these outside, right, professionals in and to earn our trust. And I think that's something you and I both do really well, right? Is sort of meet our clients where they're at to earn their trust and know like it's okay, right? Like, and we're going to help get you through this and build this team. And we've done the due diligence, right, of the people who
Right.
you should have on your team, right? Or you should interview. And there's a lot of great people out there, but there's a couple of bad eggs, right, in every field. And so I think those referrals mean a lot when they come from other seasoned professionals who know, right? And who ask for feedback from their clients and who work together in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're about halfway through, and I'm going to take a quick break so we can hear from our sponsor, and then we will be back with author and CDFA Melissa Murphy Pavone. Be right back. And we're back with Melissa Murphy Pavone, author of Divorce by Design. So, Melissa, as we mentioned, is a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst, among other things. And she also knows that in marriages, people take on certain roles. And very often, the women take on the nurturing child rearing role, the social calendar role, and leave the finances to their spouse. It happens. And I'm not being gender specific, except to say it happens more that the women leave the work of finances to the men. It's just a fact. So tell us about that. Why do you think that is? That even in this age of like women's empowerment and we all are in the workforce, like what is it that keeps us tied to this financial model?
I mean, I think it's generational, sort of ties that, back in the day, the husbands were the providers, and, a lot has changed since then. A lot of my clients now, the women, right, are the breadwinners. Um, but I still see, dependent upon income, right, that the males, in my clients' cases is are the CFOs of the family, right? They
Mhm.
sort of have the direct communication with the financial advisor, the estate planning attorney, the accountant, right? They know who those people are. And the wives and the moms, right? They tend to know who the parents are at school pickup, right? And where dance practice is and whose birthday party we need to get to. And we all take our different roles. And I see oftentimes that people stay in very unhealthy relationships because of the fear of the unknown, and
Mhm.
because the thought process of, hey, I don't even know what this would look like if I left, because I don't know if my name is on the deed, right? I don't know if I'm on the
Mhm.
mortgage. And there becomes a lot of shame. And that shame is because, right, they either took time away from the workforce to raise the kids, or they're, raising the kids and working at the same time, because most clients are, dual income households at this point. And they left some of those bigger tasks, right, to their husband or their spouse. And the truth of the matter is that that's okay. And I always say, like, the shame, my husband, and I'm still married, like, doesn't know what size shoe my kids have, right? And that doesn't mean he's a bad dad. It just means that, like, I buy the kids shoes, right? And he doesn't know what shoe size they are. And that's okay. And so you don't have to know where everything is in order to have a conversation about this or to look into it. So I always want my clients to know, like, this is a judgment-free zone. And I offer a financial clarity package, which is why I love the name of
Mhm.
divorce clarity, right? Because it's so important to just know, right? Even if by hiring a CDFA or having these conversations, it doesn't mean you're gonna get divorced, right? But you can explore what that could look like. And nobody has a crystal ball to know what it will look like, but you can sort of see best case, worst case, knowing that you'll fall somewhere realistically in between those two. And when we go through and we sort of say, all right, where are the documents? And a lot of people freeze right at that, right? And
Yeah.
about that. And it happens often, right? With with if you go to the attorney the first thing they give you is a financial affidavit. And people think it's like the SATs. It's like this huge packet of, questions, and you don't know the answers to any of them besides probably the kid's date of birth, and you freeze. And sometimes people hire me just to do the financial affidavit. They're like, can you please just hold my hand and walk me through this, because this is too overwhelming? And I will absolutely do that. And you don't need to know everything, right? You don't need to know where every dollar is, where every document is. But the more you know, the better. It's going to come out one way or another, right? It's just a matter of how long and how much it's going to cost to get this
Mhm.
information. But we can find it. And I often tell my clients, find your tax returns, because that will give us a lot of information. Um, and it's hard these days. Back in the day, right, that you could go to the mailbox and get all the statements or take pictures. And now everything's email and two-factor authentication. I'm constantly changing my own passwords because I can never get in or remember what they are, let alone break into, like, my husband's email. So it's harder, but it doesn't mean we can't do it. And there should be no shame in it. It's okay if you don't know the answers. We'll find them out. We know where to look. We know what questions to ask. We know who to ask,
Mhm.
and we'll eventually get there. So I want to make sure that people don't harbor that shame, or that shame keeps them sort of frozen.
Yeah. No, but shame is a big, heavy word and a big, heavy feeling. And, when I was doing marriage counseling one of the times, and the therapist was seeing both of us but had separate meetings, and she asked me about the money, and I'm like, well, Josh takes care of that. And she made me feel really dumb. She made
Yeah.
me feel really dumb. She's like, "You're an attorney. What do you mean?" And and for me, I was crushed. I felt ashamed. I was like, "Well, this was our deal. This was
Yeah.
what we agreed." And so I want to release that, lighten that burden,
Yeah.
and empower you to say you can learn things. You might not learn everything, but you can ask questions and you can get information.
Yeah.
And then when you provide that information to the CDFA, the CDFA could help you learn how to ask more precisely, right?
Yeah.
And this is why it's important, I think, to see a CDFA, because they can tell you what to tell the lawyer to ask for.
Yeah.
Very often, lawyers start out with discovery and you get 120 questions of interrogatories, which are questions, legal questions about your marriage, about your life. And no one wants to see a document with 120 questions.
No one.
And it's like a fishing expedition. And then when you receive the documents, you have to go fish to find what you need. And that takes so much more time. But if you start with a CDFA, the CDFA can say, I need you to find this renewal letter. I need you to find the deferred comp letter. I need you to, so you know exactly what
we're
is
missing.
missing. And then it's a much more targeted discovery, which means it's significantly less expensive.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking I got to spend $5,000 today on the professionals at the beginning, and I don't want to do that, you're going to be spending 35, 45, 55 grand or more if you don't get this prep at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, when my clients tell me that a mediator is $8,000 and that's so much, I say, divorce is an expensive process.
Yeah.
And in the scheme of divorce, $8,000 may not be so much.
Yeah.
Especially if you're getting a good mediator.
Yeah.
So, what do you think are the biggest financial mistakes that people make during divorce? And what do they come from? Like, what kind of emotions lead to that?
I think the big one is when one party is anchored to keeping the marital home. I think the marital home has an emotional attachment to it, right? Very often it's one of the biggest assets and not one that can be easily cut in half. And your children might have been born there, right? You had holidays there, right? So if there's $500,000 of equity in a home, that's different than a brokerage account statement with $500,000 worth of ETFs, right? There's just those two things are not the same, even though they have the same value of $500,000. And I think that's an important piece. So the question I always propose is not, do you want to keep the house, right? Is it sustainable for you to keep the house? And oftentimes we're giving up assets, right, in order to keep the house if we can't do an assumption or a mortgage buyout or a cash out refinance, right? So we're giving up assets. And then we have an asset that, yes, nobody wants to rent, right? Because rent is so expensive. And there's, I feel like we've all been hardwired to, like, we can't rent, we're paying somebody else's mortgage. But sometimes renting's okay temporarily, right? Sometimes it's okay to temporarily just rent something and have like a holding period.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second about that renting thing, because people say renting is just throwing away money. And that, to me, is very short-sighted, because renting gives you flexibility. Renting gives someone else the responsibility for the maintenance, which is very big. That's very big. And renting also helps you settle when you're in between.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like a nice stepping stone.
Yeah. You don't know what you're going to want next. You don't know what you're going to need next. And buying something or staying in a house to prevent that next step, you're taking on a whole lot of financial burden.
Oh,
that
yeah.
You might say, well, it's worth it for the kids. But I wonder how much the kids ultimately need to stay wedded to that house, and how much of it is your story about what the kids need.
Yeah, it's so true. And I love that, like, you question that and, help your clients unpack that, because that is something that comes up so often. And it's, I run the calculations, right? And I say, all right, you buy him out, he buys you out, we sell it tomorrow, or what if we co-own it, right? And what are the pros and what are the cons and what is everyone walking away with, right? And it's not just dollars, right? But like, who's packing up this house and who's moving all of the things, like, and sometimes I think that aspect is what freezes people to say, I'll just stay, right?
Mhm.
I'll keep the house because they're not ready to unpack literally, right? And figuratively their life, right? Because sometimes you've been in this home for a long time and think about your attic and your basement and your junk drawer. Like that's a lot to handle. But if one person leaves, there's a capital gain situation, right? This could be a huge turning point later. And I always go back to this one story that very early on in my career, I had a client who came to me and it was post divorce, and they went through the divorce and they were referred to me and they said, hey, can you help this person after the divorce? And I said, sure. And we do, financial advising, financial planning. And so I said, how did everything work out? And she said, I kept the house, but I couldn't assume the mortgage or do the buyout. So I had to withgo alimony and maintenance. So she had to give up maintenance in order to keep the house. And I said, okay. I'm like, well, how are you going to pay for, the house? Because even though it's paid off, right, we have all these things.
Taxes and
Yeah.
maintenance and everything.
And she said, I have child support. And I said, okay. But I'm like, your son is going to college, in a year. And she's like, oh no, it goes to 21. I said, yeah, but in New York, right, there's a college offset here, and nobody explained that to her. And then she had to but then I said, all right, well, how are you going to pay? What about these other things? Are you going back to work? And she said, no, I have this account. So she showed me the account. It was a retirement account. And I said, how old are you? And she said, she was in her early 50s. I said, you can't touch this until you're 59 and a half. And she looked at me and I said, there's going to be penalties and it's going to be income. And nobody explained any of these things to her. So she took on a house that was way too big for her and her son. And she had an account that she couldn't touch, right, without penalties and without, having it be taxable. And she forewent, the maintenance, and then child support ended once he was in college because there was an offset. And it was just like none of this was explained to her. And I use this because I'm like, this is a perfect storm. She ended up selling the house, having a huge capital gain. She had to go back to work. She ended up like all these things. And it was just like the perfect storm of like, if you had a CDFA first, right, before you signed on the dotted line, we could have said, hey, let's co-own this house for 1.5 more years until your son graduates, right? And then sell it. And then you can share the capital gains expense, right? And then we can downsize, because sometimes it's not just the house, right, that you can't afford. It's the roof that goes,
Yeah.
right? It's the HVAC system. It's the boiler, right? Those are the things that are not on your cash flow report that happen every couple of years, and they're huge, right? So we need to make sure that you don't become house poor and have liquidity in order to pay for these emergency, situations or like these renovations when you only have one income, right?
Yeah.
And you're on your own. And it's not just the cost of it, right? But the invisible load of like, now we have to hire somebody, right? Usually that's not the mom's job, right? The wife's job to hire, right? Like who the vendors are to come in and make sure someone's not taking advantage of you, and like
Yeah.
work on your house that, is going to be, sustainable. So there's so many layers of this, but it's just so important to really know what you're signing before you sign it. And a
Oh,
lot of times people don't want to spend the money and they end up regretting it later.
and I think the key here is like she probably had fine attorneys, but they weren't thinking about the legal ramifications of what the deal was. They were only thinking like, we're going to get this deal done.
Right.
And I had the same situation in mind, and I like got the house, but they agreed that I would buy him out of the house within a year. And there was no way I could do that.
Right.
Like no one, and I didn't know how to ask, well, how am I supposed to do that? Because I didn't have a financial advisor. And so I had to move. But because I got the house, all of the moving expenses were mine. And so now I'm paying to do all the repairs, to do the packing, to do the moving, and all of the payment on the other side to move
Right.
into a new place.
Which is a lot, that
Which is
upfront, and then that timing, making sure you can time those 2 things, right? Selling on one house and renting a new
yeah,
house, like,
it's a lot. And the tax, I got hit with a huge tax bill.
yeah,
And I'm like, where did this come from? But again, it's all because I didn't have the financial savvy and I didn't have anyone in my financial corner.
yeah,
And look, I made it through, but it was learning from my mistakes. And as I tell people regularly, I got into this business so that people won't make the same mistakes I made. It
yeah.
doesn't mean you won't make mistakes because we all make mistakes in divorce and in life. But some of the bigger ones that I experienced, I'm trying to make it easier for my clients so they have open eyes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so important, and it's the same, like, goes with my mom, I looking back at her situation, I said, we should you should have co-owned that house, right, for a few years and then sold it so that it wasn't, the kids were at the right age, right? um to be able to do that. And a lot of times people don't take the tax considerations in, or the moving costs, what you said about, like, hey, you're gonna have to pack all this up, right, and then come in and get the painter, right, and then move it all out, and, like, there's the big expense there. You want to do this with 2 people responsible for, like, the heavy lifting on
Yeah.
this aspect. So I totally get that. And then the moving, right? Of, like, okay, we need first month's, last month security, like, all of that, also, and then new furniture, and it's a
All of
lot.
it. Yeah,
A
it's a
lot.
lot. It's a lot. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
But we are at the end of time. This has been a great episode. Melissa, tell my audience both where they can find you and where they can find your book.
Yeah, let's see if the book. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
So this is the book, Divorce by Design, and you can find it on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and I'll make sure we can put it in the show notes. My name is Melissa Murphy Pavone, founder of Mindful Divorce Partners, and you can find me at mindfuldivorcepartners.com. I offer complimentary consultations, so feel free to book a half hour with me. If I can't help you, I will happily point you in the direction of someone that will. And Lisa, it's great talking to you and working with you. And I love, being part of the teams that we are on together.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. And it is reciprocated. I so appreciate you. You're easy to talk to. I hope that my audience sees how approachable you are. You're not a scary person. It's not like, oh no, the money. No, like real people, real women making serious, important choices for themselves. Um,
Absolutely.
so thank you again for my audience. I'm Lisa Lisser, LZL Coaching. You can find me at www.lzlcoaching.com. I offer complimentary 30-minute sessions. And just shout out, sometimes the hardest move is the first move, asking for help. But you've got a soft landing, and call us. So with that, I look forward to the next time on the Divorce Clarity Studio.